Today on the Worldview, we're going to talk about Katyusha rockets. Russia as basically performing a very, using their war methods to their old style war methods against Ukraine. China and the G20, which is actually a very big deal. And finally, France and their Supreme Court rejecting uh, Muslim wear in schools. All this on the Worldview. Welcome to the Worldview. I'm Chris Greco, your host for the next 30 minutes, and we'll be talking about different aspects and delving into some of the stories that are somewhat covered in the international area, and some are not covered at all in the American media. Because, of course, we're more concerned with things like, I don't know, an ex-president going to trial, which is a sad statement on the media, and shame on you for doing that. That's number one. Number two is a celebrity that just had a baby or something else that, for whatever reason, overrides anything having to do with things like, people dying in other countries. Why should we worry about that? And certainly, why should we be concerned about that? Of course, that's all facetiousness on my part. So basically, what I want to do is I want to state something right off the bat. Now, this is going to be a relatively provocative show. So those people that in the audience that don't want to hear any type of provocative aspects or things that, this is my opinion and my opinion only. So I don't want to somehow state that this is, some fact out there. This is an opinion. Some of this stuff is my opinion. And I will state in my opinion. But basically, we're going to cover at the end of this show, we're going to cover a little bit about hyphenation, which some people may find, they don't agree, they don't agree with my view. That's okay. That's perfectly okay. If you do not agree with my view, I'm all in on that. Of course, if you just call it stupid or you're a jerk or whatever else, that's just name calling, and that doesn't do me any good, and it certainly doesn't do you any good as a person with a supposed open mind, right? So if you have an open mind, then certainly I have the email at the bottom there. Email me, comment. I'm just going to go on YouTube, comment on the YouTube. Now, I'll tell you one thing. I've had a couple of comments that have not been very nice. So I'm withholding all comments so that I review them before they go out. Name calling and, all these different areas that people seem to resort to whenever there's something that, they don't agree with. I don't accept that. Comment intellectually, comment instructively, comment with information, and I will certainly take a look at that. I am not above looking at other pieces of information. So all that being said, let's talk about Ukraine just for a second here. Basically, what's happened, we've now given another $1 billion to Ukraine for arms. Interestingly enough, and this is something that is very, I want to make sure that people understand where I'm coming from on this. So I was with the Department of Defense for a number of decades, and the Department of Defense has to do with weapons. The Department of Defense has to do with building defense, but with military services, with all these different things that go along with that. The Secretary of State or the State Department has to do with diplomacy. Diplomacy. Okay, now this is very, very important. Blinken goes over as the Secretary of State, which is the chief diplomat of the United States, to tell Ukraine that they're going to give them $1 billion worth of weapons. Now, this is totally and completely unacceptable. Um, because all I ever heard from the State Department, well, when I was with the Department of Defense, as well as with Social Security Administration, wherever else, is that we are diplomacy. We talk about diplomacy. We talk about we want to it's all about diplomatic relations. It's all about this and this and that diplomatic. It's all about diplomatic this, blah blah blah. Well, I'll tell you what. You have your chief diplomat go over there and basically say, we're going to give weapons to Ukraine so that they can battle the Russians. That's not diplomacy, folks. And if somebody, hey, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me. No, Chris, the State Department has something to do with weaponry. Really, it does? That's interesting. I'd like to know exactly what that is. Where's the code on that for the accounting under weapons? I just want to see that. When we talk about and also, where's that $1 billion going? They're saying, oh, it's going to different types of weapons and different this. Really, how much of that is going to government contractors? I don't mean to bust on government contractors, but this is ridiculous. I mean, we're already spending billions on government contractors. Look, I'll tell you what. Go to the Department of Defense spending and see how much is spent on contractors. In fact, on the data show, which I'm going to do here next, I will go into that. I will go into how much of the Department of Defense budget is spent on contracting, because right now their budget, according to the newest budget, is $900 billion. Folks, that's almost $1 trillion we are spending. $1 trillion we're spending on defense a year, and it's never going to go down now. It's going to be $1 trillion a year. You know how much that equates to? That equates the amount of benefits that are given in Social Security every year. About $1 trillion. I know, yeah. So basically $2 trillion, $1 trillion is given to defense, $1 trillion is for benefits that we paid into. Okay, we paid into that. Those people that paid in Social Security, $1 trillion. So I mean, we're getting this situation kind of crosswise, and it's kind of disappointing me from the standpoint that there's Blinken sitting out there saying, okay, I'm going to go as a chief diplomat, and while he's there, of course, they have a missile attack, which we'll go into in a second here. So let's go into a missile attack. Missile attacks. What is it about Russia? And it's funny because Russia always goes back to the old Soviet tactics. And there was recently a missile attack while Blinken was there on a village or a town. And the town was, there was no military there. There was no military bases there. The president of Ukraine, he's no. There's nothing there. It's all civilian. Let me tell you something about war, and not that I have never been in combat. And those people that are watching this that have been in combat, you tell me if I'm wrong. But war is hell. General Sherman in the Civil War had it right. The Union general who said, "War is hell. War is hell." I mean, it's a situation where why should they limit their attacks against military aspects? First of all, I am sure as can be, that there are military people, soldiers, that are visiting that village or that town as rest for R&R. Well, let me tell you something. You blow up that town, and all of a sudden there's no more place for R&R. In other words, you do not give the enemy rest, ever. You don't give the enemy rest, ever. You constantly keep up the attacks, We did it in World War II against the Germans. And I mean, it was... against the Axis, and it was debilitating. Constant bombing, and in Japan, constant bombing, and let me tell you, it finally ended up in surrender because now the Germans they fought to basically the last person in Berlin, but the bottom line is that that was and the Russians are coming in from the east side, which was interesting. So what did the Russians use? What did the Soviets use? Well, the Soviets used what they call Katyusha rockets. The Katyusha rocket was in fact, it very much says it, right here, militaryhistory.now or militaryhistorynow.com. The Katyusha was omnipresent on the Eastern Front and likely contributed as much to the Allied victory as the M4 Sherman tank, the Higgins boat, or the Spitfire. Now, this is 1940s technology, right? So basically, these are the Katyusha rockets, right? So, I mean, you have the Katyusha rockets were just a horrible situation. And what happens is well, shoot. And so what happens is that these Katyusha rockets, were artillery, and they were the type of artillery that when you have this, these Katyusha rockets firing, I mean, they were not guided. They were not guided. They were just fired. I mean, they had a warhead on them, and they just fired, and just wherever they went, they went. Destroyed the Germans' morale. Destroyed them. The German army morale was destroyed because of this, and they were just loaded up, and they would just let them fly. And major drawbacks and whatever else. But look at this. I mean, this was a scary. I mean, could you imagine being on the German lines and all of a sudden you see all these flashes coming towards you? I mean, it's horrible. And they just, yeah, terrified the Germans. You know, it's a I mean, it was just an amazing rocket launcher, and it was continued to be improved, and I think that they're using it today. So I mean, it's interesting. So let's take a look at this just for a second here. We're going to go to Google Maps here, because I think this is very Google Earth. I think it's very interesting. They're saying now this is my opinion. My opinion is those Ukrainians that are watching this, or those people that are really, really, really into Ukraine, you can disagree, and that's perfectly okay, and I do understand. But I'm going to tell you something. The Ukrainians are not winning this war. The Ukrainians are not winning this war. Let me say it a third time. They are not winning this war. Now, they are all about morale, and they are all about those areas. Now, the fighting Ukrainian on the front lines is a hero. They are absolutely amazing. I mean, they are out there putting their all, for their country. And it's an amazing, being a veteran. I tear up, because these people are fighting for their country, and they're fighting an amazing amount. But let me tell you something, they're not winning. And you sit back and you say, well, Chris, why would you state that? Because they're not. Look at the villages that have been destroyed. Look at the infrastructure that's been destroyed. Look at the things that have to get built back up again. The Russians, people, and our president, our president has stated that the Russians have already lost. The Russians have not lost this war, and they're not going to lose this war. This will go on for decades. And people sit there and tell me, oh, yeah, how can you state that? Well, first of all, because of 95% confidence interval, which I've done, and it's, it can go on for years. That's number one. The second thing is because what they're saying right now is that the area that was taken by the Russians, the Donetsk region and Luhansk region, all those areas, they said they are taking, the Ukrainians have taken back a certain percentage of what the Russians have taken since the war began. This is very, very, very important, a very important differentiation when you talk about that, is because when you talk about the Ukrainians taking back territory that the Russians took at the beginning of the war, it means that's the territory in addition to the regions that are already Russian. So what the Ukrainian president has stated is, we're going to take back the area also that has been annexed. Well, you can't do that until you take back those areas that have already been taken by the Russians. Now, you have a certain percentage of that, but that is not all of it. So you have to take back all that just to get to the point where you began. Then you have to figure out what you're going to do from there. So we're giving $1 billion here, $1 billion there. And let me tell you something, it's going to be a lot more to be able to take that region back wherever they need to be able to get to that region of, the Donetsk and Luhansk region. So, I mean, this is where this situation exists. And this is where it's going to be really, really hard for the Ukrainians to fight, because they're going to have to fight and fight and fight and continue fighting forever. It's going to be a decade, easy decade here, easy 10 years. And the Russians have no problem with that. They have no problem, none whatsoever, with making this go for as long as they need to go. So, I mean, and a lot of people sit there and say, well, how can you be so sure? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is because this right here. Xi, the Chinese premier, is not going to attend the G20 summit. So interestingly enough, Xi has stated he's not going to attend. Now President Biden's disappointed. Yeah, right. Whatever, Joe. But the bottom line is this: is that um, you know, the, I'm disappointed, but I'm going to see him. Yeah, I hope to God he's not going to go to China to see him. Kowtow like everyone else has done to be able to, Blinken and the rest of the troops that have gone over there and basically begged forgiveness from China, because that's the way it looks. It looks like we're doing that, and that's not cool. Hopefully he'll meet at a neutral site or bring Xi to the U.S., but Xi will never come to the U.S. Let me tell you something. Xi will never come to Washington. He'll send his foreign ministers, he'll send whatever, but he's not going to go to Washington, because let me tell you something. Right now, China is in a position of strength, and they sit back, and all the economists are saying, "Oh, they're losing money and they're going into debt, and whatever else." China's not going into debt. China's not going into debt. They have other countries. They have whole countries that are in their debt. How can they possibly go into debt? That's number one. Number two is that they have the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and they have BRICS, right? And I've gone over this over and over and over and over again. It's funny how the international media kind of hit on this, but the SCO is very rarely hit upon. And I'm sitting back going, they're hitting BRICS a lot. It's all about BRICS, right? It's all about, BRICS, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, right? And other countries are starting to come in and ask to be part of that. But the SCO is very rarely hit, right? Very rarely hit. Even Tajikistan is part of the SCO. The Stans are part of the NCO. So what does this have to do with? It has to do with sovereignty. Let's get an example of sovereignty. So the Romanians just came on and stated that yes, the drone that went to the country was Russian, and it's unacceptable, and they're a NATO country and whatever else. But look up Romania-Russia relationships, Romania-Soviet relationships. They've always disliked the Soviets, always disliked Russia, always. I mean, they never liked the Russians. And they never they were like the Ukrainians. They never liked it. Of course, Romania had some issues with the corrupt governments, things like that, under Ceausescu and a couple other things. But this is, the Romania would love to go against Russia. I mean, they would. I mean, they do not and never have liked Russia, and that's gone all the way back in the 1970s. Stuff I can't go into, but basically, it's just look it up. So that's what's happening here, and it's funny, and what's hilarious is that they're going to meet in India. They're going to meet in India, which is hilarious. It really is. It really is funny. The SCO also includes India and Pakistan, which is really funny to watch. Armenia and Azerbaijan are both part of the SCO. Folks, I know this doesn't reach out to a lot of people, and nothing I can do about that. I can try to market it and do whatever. But I mean, and I haven't talked about this on Caravans to Midnight, which is a show, and that was on. I was on it live, and the Caravans to Midnight. We talked about this a little bit, but basically, and I'm not saying I agree wholeheartedly with the entire show, but it was nice to be able to be on there to express some data aspects and also to talk about this worldview aspect. So this is, the idea behind all of this is to understand that China is strong. China is very strong, and they are sitting back waiting for an opportunity to make this stuff happen. And it's really going to be interesting how it all works. So now that we hit that, and by the way, this is BBC, which I love BBC. I just love them. They just do an absolutely fantastic job of international reporting. So I really do appreciate it. Good for them. Now, let's go back to France, because I think this is very important. Al Jazeera News. France's top court rejects appeal against ban on wearing abaya in schools. Now, this is now Macron. I just heard this on Haystack News. Macron has stated that he wants all schools to be secular. In order to remain secular, he does not want religious dress to be a part of that. And it's absolutely hilarious when you think about it, because if that were the situation, then how far does that go? In other words, does that go to hairstyles? If you have Hasidic Jews that are going to public school, are you going to say they cannot wear their hair a certain way? Or they say they're going to have to cut their hair to make it, like everyone else? So it's going to be really interesting. The rights of Muslims. Everybody tells me, including people that I know personally, that France is fantastic. France is so free. They treat everybody the same. It's just an amazing thing. Oh, they just, they're amazing. Really? Well, how about here? How about right here? Let me ask you a question. Would that happen in America? Would the United States, would we say, no, you cannot wear any type of Muslim dress when you're going to school, when you're going to public school? I mean, think about that. Think about that. Everyone says, we ought to go to France. Go to France. Go. Have fun there. Because that's, this is a situation that, it's getting worse and worse and worse over there from that standpoint. So it's, in fact, it says right here, schools in France send dozens of Muslim girls home for wearing abayas. I mean, and then French school sends girl home for wearing kimono. So it's just goes really off the top. It just goes nuts. And this is where everybody talks about. Now, in the next few minutes, what I'd like to talk about is hyphenation. And talk about the worldview. I want to talk about hyphenation. So here's what I want to talk about. Just again, it won't be long, but just a couple of minutes. So what we have here in the United States is this thing where we put the person's origination country first and then America last. I think that is horse poop, and I think that needs to go away. And people that are watching this show, this is the opinion portion. If you want to quit here, that's fine. Basically, what happens is you talk to people about African American, Italian American, whatever it is, German American, whatever it is. Do you see that over in Europe? No, you do not see that over in Europe, folks. You don't see somebody say, "Oh, a black German," or a black Italian, or African Italian, or you don't hear that. You don't hear that because if you're Italian, you're Italian. If you're German, you're German. It's the groups. Abraham Lincoln said, "A nation divided against itself will not stand. Will not stand." So something like this. So instead of saying African American, I say American of blank descent, right? Right. So American of blank descent, whatever that may be, or American of blank origin, whatever you're going to say. American of Italian descent, American of African descent, American of whatever. Or what we used to do is a long time ago is it was like, what are you? Blank generation whatever. I'm blank generation Italian. Okay. So like third generation Italian or whatever it is. So, that's what that was. And that's where we talk about that. That's where it's about. So, American of blank descent, or it's, generation American or generation Italian, right? Generation German, generation African, and it's interesting because it's like, so I can say, so they say, well, how, what's first generation? First generation is you come over from Italy, your first generation. You come over from Germany, your first generation. You come over your first generation. So generation aspects was that the way, that's the way we used to say it. It was third generation Italian, it was second generation, third generation, fourth generation, whatever it was. So a lot of people don't want to use that. Why? Well, because it gets into ridiculousness. It gets into, I'm 32nd generation, whatever. I'm 45th generation. It's like, whoa. So it's that type of situation. So enough with the hyphenation. Enough. We have done enough damage to America by doing that. We are all Americans. Folks, we are all Americans. If you're a naturalized citizen, if you're born in the U.S., it's really funny how sometimes I take a look at these other countries, you can be born in that country, and unless you're born of a certain, of the male, or you're born of the female, whatever, you're still not a citizen. You're still not a citizen. Our country says if you're born in the U.S., you're a U.S. citizen. So basically what happens is that you are an American. You are an American. And it's funny because everyone sits there and says, well, what about other countries? Well, look at Canada. Look at Canada. I want to point this out very, very succinctly. Um, I was I was walking along my neighborhood, and I see a flag, and my wife says, "What kind of flag is that?" I said, "That's a Quebec province flag," and she goes, "What?" I said, "That's a Quebec, however you want to pronounce it, province flag." In other words, it's French Canadian. And the French Canadians are really funny because they consider themselves French. They speak French. They have French signs. They align themselves with France, and it's really funny to watch how the French Canadians are coming into the Canadian government, and they're being elected in the Canadian government. And I'm sitting back going, "Oh, this is great." So you're going to just align yourself with France. Good for you. I mean, because France is so fantastic. I mean, they've just told the Muslim women that they can't wear abayas. So they're super. Just align yourself with them. That's great. So basically, what happens is that it wasn't a Canadian flag, folks. It was not a Canadian flag. It was a French. It was a Quebec province flag, and that's interesting because everyone says, "Well, every province has a flag." Yes, I know, but I haven't seen any of those flags here in this area. I haven't seen any of those flags here except that one province flag. Canadian flag I've seen. That's fine. You want to fly a Canadian flag? I go for it. I'm fine with that. You want to fly a Mexican flag? Okay, fine. I mean, I'd rather fly an American flag because you're American. But hey, if you have that much pride in that area, I just don't have a problem with it. Just so long as you don't attempt to take an American flag down, put up a Mexican flag, at some pole somewhere at our main community, then I would be upset. So that's fine, but this is what hyphenation does. Hyphenation destroys a country from within. It destroys it. I mean, right now, I mean, Canada is not doing that well. The National Health Service is not doing that well. UK is not doing that well. It's really hurting. We're probably in good shape at this point internally if we can stay united. If we can stay united, very important. As in the worldview, people are looking at us. They're looking at us, and they're taking our temperature, and they're saying, is the United States sick, or are they just, is it just a bad cold? So is it something terminal, or is it a bad cold? And I think that at this point, that's what we need to do. But this hyphenation thing needs to go away. It needs to say bye-bye. We need to stop this, and we need to say, look, you're an American of African descent. You're an American of Italian descent. You're an American of German descent. You're an American of whatever descent. And in this way, what happens is you don't get confused. Also, there's a definition there, and we'll go into this a little bit in the data show about data definition. What makes you an African American? What percentage? 50, 40, 30, 10, 8? What percentage makes you who you are? And the interesting thing about it is that if you're 32nd generation, Italian, why don't you just say American? I'm American. This is what I am. I mean, if somebody has an accent or whatever else, then I ask, where are your relatives from? Where are your relatives from? Where's your grandfather, great grandfather from, or whatever else? I try to go that route rather than saying where are you from, because they're American. They're if they're here and they're paying their taxes and they're doing whatever, they're American. So I don't care if they have an accent or not. But I'd like to know, because sometimes if they're Italian, I'd like to be able to speak to them in Italian. They get a big kick out of that. So it's that type of thing that we talk about. So anyways, thank you so much for listening to the opinion portion of the show. But the worldview is very important. And I think what we have from a worldview and what the world has as us as a view are both very important from that standpoint. So that's pretty much it for the worldview. I want to say thank you so much for watching, and just understand again that the opinion portion is just that, it's opinion. But I'd feel just like I was missing an opportunity here to say my piece, because I think that people, even though they will be upset in the beginning, it's kind of like, no, we need hyphenation because we need that, right? I think if you calm down and you take a breath, you'll find that the solution that I have when you talk about American of blank descent, yes, it's a little bit more to say. It's not this little hyphenation thing where you can say it in 2 words, but it's not correct. Otherwise, you're going to have to say American African. You're gonna have to say American African, or you're gonna have to say American Italian, or you're gonna have to say American. Put America first. American, you're American, and that's very, very important. And we got to get back into saying that we're America. This is a land that has been fought for and has made many sacrifices to be able to be who we are. We don't want to just throw that away. And on that note, this is Chris Greco thanking you again for watching Worldview, and I'll see you next time on the Worldview.